I've been struggling writing draft 2, and a few days ago I decided to just stop writing it and start over. I thought 2 weeks would be enough time to finish draft 1 and then start draft 2, and it absolutely was not enough time. During those 2 weeks, I made a new outline, thought about all these changes I was going to make, and felt really confident when I started draft 2. But then I quickly realized I was not just revising my first draft, I was doing a complete rewrite. My story was turning into something I didn't even recognize, and while I liked what I wrote at the beginning of this draft 2, it wasn't really draft 2. It was almost no, it definitely was a completely different story. And as I was thinking more about it, I realized I just need to stop what I'm doing, go back to my draft 1, remember what I liked about it, think about what I want to change, and then start over. Now I feel like I am on a better path, but I'm still struggling to write this draft 2. So I'm going to take some more time and not write anything for this draft until I start that 10K challenge, and instead I'm going to focus on writing scenes, which is something I didn't do before, and I think not focusing on scenes is something that was really holding me back from making improvements on this first draft, and that's why I ended up just completely rewriting and making draft 2 be something that looked nothing like the first one. But since I actually do like what I wrote for this fake draft 2, I've decided that I'm going to keep it for a different story altogether, but I'm going to go back to my draft 1, look at it, and revise it. And actually revise it this time, not make a completely different story. But before I realized that I was doing a rewrite instead of just a revision, I was really struggling. My initial goal was to write about 1,000 words a day, have the weekends off, or to use the weekends as time to catch up on the days I didn't fully get to my 1,000 word goal, and I thought that was totally doable. I did a couple challenges in the past where I was writing at least 1,000 words a day, and I wasn't having any difficulties doing it, but I was barely writing 100 words a day starting on this draft. And after a week of not being able to write as much as I wanted to, I decided to stop writing and to assess what's going on, and that's when I realized this is way too much of a rewrite, and I don't think I'm doing the right thing with this draft 2. I think in a previous video I mentioned how I was going to go from the story being set in the 90s to being set in the 20s, taking 2 characters and combining them into one, and just making some other changes, and that was just too much. It doesn't sound like it's a lot, but as I was making those few changes, it really made me rethink so much more of the story, to the point where, like I said, it wasn't even the same story at all. It actually fits more as a prequel to the first draft of what I'm writing, but that wasn't my intention. And so for the past few days, I've been looking a lot into scenes. All I want to do for this next week is focus on the scenes I want my book to have. What's really nice is I already have draft 1 done, so I'm just kind of looking at the scenes that already exist, but I'm also being more structured as I think about these scenes, because the first time I did this draft, I didn't have scenes in mind. I was more so focused on what the entire chapter was going to look like. But now I know that a chapter can be one scene, or it can be 2, 3, or more scenes. I know that there's so much writing advice out there, and you can probably write your scene in whatever way you want, but I think as someone who is still very new to trying to be a professional writer, I really find a lot of help in someone just telling me a general outline to follow, and then from there I can decide what rules I'm going to break. But I like to start off with having some rules as a guideline to really help me get started, and I found this video that talked about 2 kinds of scenes that your book should have, and I watched another video about what even makes a compelling scene. So the first kind of scene is a goal scene, and that has the goal the character has, the conflict or the things that are stopping the character from reaching that goal, and then the disaster. What happens? Do they not reach the goal? Do they reach the goal? But what are the negative consequences maybe of getting that goal? And then the other scene that comes directly after that is a reaction scene, which is a reaction to the disaster, a dilemma, so some kind of choice the character has to make, and it shouldn't be something that is easy. It shouldn't be an obviously easy choice and a difficult choice. And then there's the decision. What did the character decide to do based on the dilemma that they were in? And then you start back over with the goal. So based on that decision, what is their new goal? What are the new conflicts, disaster, and then so on and so forth. And so I think that's actually really helpful for me to think about breaking my scenes down into those 2 categories. And I can actually see how that's super helpful when you're planning out your scenes and just knowing what your characters are going to be doing throughout a chapter. Then again, the other video was like 9 different ways to make sure that you have interesting scenes. And like I said, you can follow whatever advice you want, but for me, it was really nice just having some kind of guideline to follow, so I'll link those 2 videos down below if you're interested. If you couldn't tell, I am in my pajamas because it is finally the weekend. I am ready to relax and I just want to feel cozy as I work on these scenes. So with all this new knowledge that I have with how to write scenes, what to include in the scenes, and what kind of scenes I should be writing, I'm going to try that out and then give you all an update when I'm done. I'm only going to work on the first maybe 4 scenes just to get started, and then do some more over the next few days. Okay, so I've written 4 scenes and I'm feeling really good about them because this aligns a lot more with my original draft, but also does add some things to make it even better. And that's what I really want to focus on as I continue writing these scenes. It needs to still look like my first draft, just a better version of it, not something completely different. If you're also getting close to finishing your first draft, I beg of you to just take a good amount of time before you start working on your second draft. Think of ways to make your first draft better, and then even sit on those ideas, because those first ideas may not be the ones that you actually end up needing to go with to actually make your first draft better. Don't get caught up in accidentally rewriting your first draft. Unless it's something that you intentionally want to do, that's totally fine, but it's not what I wanted to do, and that's what I ended up doing. So I want to warn you against accidentally doing that. But really, over this past week, I've really just learned to give myself time. I don't need to rush things so much. I have time to get all this done. I don't need to rush and end up creating something I don't recognize and I don't like. If you finish a first draft, what are the things that you did to prepare yourself for starting draft 2? I'd love to know. Any tips, advice would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.